playoff is about to look a little bit different here per Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, letting the people know on, I guess it was Sunday night, that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to throw their weight around, have been throwing their weight around for a while now, and they're going to have, it seems like here, per the report, each have 4 guaranteed spots in the college football playoff. So we did a reaction video to this on Monday morning, another reason to be subscribed. But I want us to unpack 1, like what's going on here, 2, why this is happening, 3, what it means, and 4, what could be next. Because you and I both know, man, this whole conference realignment thing with the playoff switching up and things of that nature, it's like musical chairs. And musical chairs, from what I can gather, is the game in college football right now where the music is starting to slow down a little bit. You better find a chair, and if you can find a chair in the Big Ten and the SEC, more power to you. So again, 4 spots automatically going to be given, it looks like here, for the Big Ten and the SEC as we reach the next iteration of what the college football playoff could look like. Now, this is likely going to be a 14-team or 16-team college football playoff. So my first thought here is, well, what happens to the committee? Because in a 14-team playoff, we're still keeping those conference champions as bids, auto bids into the college football playoff. So you have 8 from the SEC and Big Ten combined, and then you have a Big 12 champ, You have an ACC champ. You have the highest ranked G5 champ. That makes 11. So what, a committee's going to decide on 3 teams? We go to 16, committee decides on 5 teams. Oh, by the way, Notre Dame, they're protected in this whole thing. If they're in the top 14 of a 14-team playoff, they'll have a spot in the college football playoff. So you see how this thing is slowly but surely starting to look a lot more NFL-ish. Why is this happening? If I'm a Big 12 fan today, and I'm just now finding out about this, 1, I apologize, and I feel for you, and I probably resonate a little bit more than you even think I resonate with you when it comes to how this impacts your conference. But I'm sitting here saying, so the Big Ten and the SEC just get to walk in here and take 4 spots each? 8 spots total? How does that work? JD, walk me through the math on that one. And the math, quite frankly, from what I can gather, is a lot more geared towards revenue and viewership and all those things. The best way to put this, and I said this in our reaction video, I'll say it again, the SEC and the Big Ten are hosting a party. They are that rich friend that has the mansion, they have the setup, they have whatever they need to host the party. They draw a lot of eyeballs, they draw a lot of guests. So if you want to be at their party, be a part of their party, you have got to play by their rules. The report also says, per Ross Dellinger, at the front of the article, he says, listen, man, the SEC and the Big Ten, they told him straight up, if you don't want to play by our rules, then you're not invited to our party. In fact, we'll go have our own party, our own playoff somewhere else. Again, they are the ones that are holding all the cards here, so that's the reason why they'd be able to make a move like that. And, of course, not just speaking to the Big 12 here, also speaking to the ACC. I'll give you my take on this in a little bit. Spoiler alert, not a huge fan of it. Not just the fact that we're expanding the playoff, but not a big fan of automatic bids for a conference in general. I digress. So what's going to happen in the immediate effect? 1, the SEC is likely going to go to 9 conference games. If you remember correctly, that was a big talking point throughout this whole discussion as we moved into the 12-team playoff. Is, well, they're only playing 8 conference games. We're all playing 9. How does that work? Well, the SEC thinks pretty highly of themselves, and it's understandable to see why that is, given their track record of national titles and NFL draft or NFL draftees. I digress. They're saying we're not going to go and schedule another game against one of our conference opponents if we think that could hurt our chances of making the college football playoff. Because y'all want to talk about records so much, that's fine, talk about the records, but if you're not giving us any extra credit for playing Georgia and A&M in the last couple of weeks, then we're going to make sure we play less conference games, protect ourselves, be ready for the postseason, or help ourselves get more people into the postseason. People, of course, being teams here. The reason why that's not going to be the case anymore is because if you're the SEC or the Big Ten, SEC in regards to the 9 conference games, you now have a little bit of a safety net. Like, you don't have to worry quite as much playing an extra conference game because you know, okay, if I'm just in the top 4 of my conference, I'm going to have a seat at the table. Conference title weekend, however, will look different for both of these conferences. I don't know how it's going to impact the other conferences, to be honest with you, but have to believe there'll be some kind of ripple effect. What Ross Dellinger is suggesting or is talking about in his article is that conference title weekend will turn more so into a conference college football playoff weekend. And it's easy to see why. Like, if I have the top 2 teams in my conference, I don't want them to play an extra game, get more tread on the tires, and potentially hurt their chances when they get to the college football playoff. How different, and again, this is an open-ended question. I don't know if it changes anything, but Georgia, at the very least, probably feels better about their chances if they don't play in the SEC title game and Carson Beck is healthy for their playoff run. Still happy to win the SEC. I digress. But the thought here is you can have 3 versus 6 in your conference and 4 versus 5 play each other to get those final 2 spots in both the Big Ten and the SEC as it pertains to the college football playoff. So conference title looking different for the SEC and the Big Ten. The champions you would imagine are probably decided during the regular season. The SEC going to 9 conference games. And in addition to all of this now, if you're a fan of just seeing big brands play each other, then you're probably a favor of this. The SEC and the Big Ten, it sounds like, are going to have a scheduling agreement. Why? Because it's going to make a lot of money. Like Michigan, Texas made everybody a lot of money. Ohio State playing Alabama, that'll make you some money. Georgia and Penn State will make you some money. I mean, you go down the list here, and you can just talk about what LSU and Oregon will make you some money. Again, safety net, everyone gets more money. That's kind of the way this whole thing is trending. And the thing that I think is most interesting about this, I don't know that anybody's that surprised that the SEC and the Big Ten are holding a lot of cards here. Where this gets interesting to me is what happens to the other schools in this whole situation, or the other conferences rather, that aren't in the SEC and the Big Ten. Like if I'm a Clemson and a Florida State, I've been trying to get out of the ACC for the better part of the last, year plus? I would have to believe now those lawyers that are working for the Clemsons and the Florida States of the world to get them out of the ACC, if they weren't working overnight before, they're probably doing that right now. That's where I think this whole discussion leads next, is what are the next dominoes to fall? We didn't cover this on this previous reaction video. I want to do so right now. To me, the next domino to fall is the ACC is going to have, I believe, a very Pac-12 come apart at the seams kind of, let's call it what it is, a downfall. And I'm not here for it. I appreciate and love the ACC. It's a big part of my college football fandom and the fabric that is. But if Florida State and Clemson when and if they find their way out of the conference, which, again, more urgency now with this whole college football playoff automatic qualifier situation, that's only going to create the Jenga effect. Because when those two leave, what do you think Miami's doing? What do you think the SMUs of the world are doing? And it may be a slow deterioration. I think it'll be a lot more all at once-ish. I think it'll be a lot like when you saw USC and UCLA leave, then you saw Oregon and Washington leave from the Pac-12, and that whole thing crumbled, unfortunately, pretty quickly. That's a guy who grew up on Pac-10 football, but it is what it is. My question then becomes, what happens to the Big 12? Because I think what will happen is the ACC probably gets cleaned out for the most part first. I think what will happen is we'll get a few years down the line, and then the Big 12, from a survival perspective, schools within that conference will say, okay, well, this thing is clearly headed towards an AFC-NFC model. We got to find a way to get on board one of those ships. Whoever wants us, we got to jump and got to make it happen. This is not me down on the Big 12. This is, I think, the way this thing is going to shake out. Who would that be to make the first jump? UCF makes a lot of sense with just how large their alumni base is and the attraction that would be. TCU, that whole Dallas-Fort Worth tie could be appealing to, I would have to believe, one of these conferences if it gets down to it. Also, maybe the package deal of like an Arizona State could be a good deal. And again, I understand why this is all happening. I totally do. I understand that this is money calling the shots. I understand that the SEC and the Big Ten, like we've said now many times, hold a lot of the cards. But unfortunately, I don't think this is best for the sport. And we have nobody to blame here but ourselves. Now, I guess you could say, JD, we blame greed and we blame the people wearing suits making these decisions. Of course, I hear that. But remember now, a lot of us, say us, I don't include ourselves here, fortunately and unfortunately on this show, we're calling for an expanded playoff. Why? Inclusion. Want to let the little guy have a chance now. And that was all given to us. I keep saying this. I think it was kind of some smoke and mirrors. Because if we thought we were going to live in a world where the SEC and the Big Ten were going to get the same number of teams guaranteed in as a G5 or as an ACC or a Big 12, I think we were kidding ourselves. And given the amount of power that is going unchecked in college football right now between the SEC and the Big 10 and the rest of the sport, it's hard to blame anybody. Because if I'm in charge of the Big 10, yes, I'm going to act in interest of my schools. I'm not going to worry about the health of college football. I'm trying to help my schools all make more money and have success and make the playoff and all that, and therefore so on and so be it. But what I will say, just to go our final take on this, I would have been in favor of if we had to go to more teams, just doing away with auto bids. We said it yesterday. I keep referring back to the last video because it's a very similar thing that we're saying. I just wanted to make sure we said it together in a full show capacity. Auto bids to me are kind of funny because they reward a conference. Not that you shouldn't be rewarded for winning your conference or for having success within your conference, but I don't think every conference is equal any given year. Like I would say the last year of the Pac-12, you could make a case for the Pac-12 being the best conference in college football. Let's reward teams. Let's reward teams during specific seasons and not conferences every single year. To me, that doesn't make a ton of sense. So it's unfortunate. I keep saying nostalgia is one of the pillars of college football, and I would have loved to see that hold a little bit more steady for a longer period of time. There's going to be a day and age where my little girl grows up and she says, "Dad, what was the Pac-10 like?" And it'll probably draw a tear or two from my eye, and it's going to be something that I just have to find a way to work my way through. I'll tell her about it. It's not going to be without some emotion baked in there. So that's where we're headed. That's what's happening here. These are all, again, reports. You hear words like momentum and building. This is happening. Okay, this is going to happen. It's a matter of when, not if, and the specifics, whether it's 16 teams or 14 teams. But the Big Ten, the SEC, they will each have 4 teams, and the rest of college football is going to have to figure out what to do next. And my guess is the Super Conference era is a lot closer than we all thought. So here we go.